Hello, I am Dr. Mirela Cherneyanu, and I welcome you to the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast, the WOW MD podcast. I am not your typical wellness coach, and this is not a typical wellness podcast. Here, I'll discuss educational facts about health, hormones, intimacy, anti-aging, and beauty trends, all very hot topics, to empower you to make great choices when it comes to your health and to your body. I want you to go, wow, I did not know that. Or, wow, this is going to make a great difference for me. Our healthcare system is broken and it needs a revolution. You and I can start one today. I am willing to share my knowledge with the world if you're willing to listen. Let's get started. Hello, listener, and thank you for being here for another episode of the Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD podcast. In the past few episodes, I started out by talking about the female pelvic organs, and I got a little sidetracked. I started talking about uterine cancer that led me to exposure to toxins and chemicals and hormone disruptors, which led me down the rabbit hole of how contaminated our modern diet is. So I really wanted to stay on point and finish the conversation about diet, why we are so focused on what and how we eat. Because the truth is, we are all very worried or concerned with food. And I see a lot of patients that decide to follow a certain diet. And my, oh my, do they feel better? They do. And they believe, well, this is the end of my problem. But the diet is not usually the problem. It contributes to the problem and to the issue for sure. But focusing on diet only will get the health issue better only so far or so much. It's working. Food is medicine. However, if the root cause is not addressed, it will likely come back soon after you stop the diet. So I want to talk about how we're so focused on diet and why. And first of all, this focus on diet, it's a nice way to say we're concentrated or worried about it or thinking about it. But in reality is that some of us are actually obsessed with food. So a lot of us, I believe, many of us are very focused on what we eat to the point where some of us might become obsessive about our diet. And it's definitely happening in the world today because of a few reasons. And let me go over these because I think that they're interesting. First of all, we are much more aware of our health. There is a growing awareness of the impact our diet has on our overall health. What's interesting is enough people in general are much more conscious of how food choices can affect their well-being. Everybody knows diet is important, and what we put in our mouth is definitely going to affect our health. But in spite of this, we suffer increasing rates of chronic disease, especially obesity, diabetes, heart disease. They're all on the rise. And of course, let's not forget cancer. So that was number one. We're much more aware of our health. We have a growing awareness of the impact of the diet that we eat on our general health. So number two reason why we're really focused and obsessive about our diet, because of the rise of social media, of health influencers and wellness trends. All of these have popularized different types of diets and different types of eating styles. There's a ton of information available very readily online, and many individuals are exposed to a tremendous amount of dietary advice. It's everywhere you look. And the large majority of people who seek this information may feel pressured to adopt certain eating patterns with the usual promise, eat this way, you lose weight. Or eat this way and your problem goes away. Or eat this way and feel a lot better. Number three, we live in a world where modern society places a very strong emphasis on our physical appearance, which is leading many people to focus on their diet and the restriction of it as a means to achieve a desirable body shape or weight. We do live in a world governed by body culture, where the pursuit of this idealized body image drives various dietary choices and drives our perceptions of food. Number four, reason why we're so obsessed with food is because we are the victims of the food industry marketing. Many food companies promote products that align with health trends or actually claim to offer specific health benefits. Many of these companies have marketing tactics that influence consumer choice and perpetuate beliefs that certain foods or certain diets are better, that they're more likely to provide us with more success in our quest for better health or for a better, healthier weight. And 5, last but not least, our world today is that we live in a wellness culture, which is, again, very interesting and in opposition with the rates of obesity, inflammation, cancer, autoimmune illness, which are all on the rise. And there is a very strong wellness industry that promotes holistic approaches to health, including nutrition, fitness, mindfulness, stress management, and self-care. In all of these wellness culture trends, our diet is viewed as a huge and major component of our overall well-being. And pretty much all people, show me someone who isn't, but all people are extremely drawn to holistic wellness practices that prioritize self-care and balance, because we realize more and more acutely that there is no magic pill to give us back our health, that big pharma doesn't have it, is not it, and that food can be medicine. So let's talk about, is there such a thing as a perfect diet? And if there is, which one might be the best of all the diets that are available out there? I am going to start with a review and discussion of different types of diets available, which one is best. I'm going to leave that for next week. But in this episode, I'm simply going to go over them and enumerate some of the most important and well-known diets. I will discuss them in more detail next week, so stay tuned. You all might have heard of the Mediterranean diet. This diet is based on traditional eating patterns of countries that border the Mediterranean Sea. The paleo diet, well known, everybody's heard about it. It is inspired by the presumed diet of the Paleolithic humans and is focused on whole foods, excluding grains, dairy, and any processed foods. The keto diet. Who hasn't ketoed at least once or twice in their life? It is a very high in fat and moderate protein intake diet and very low in carbs. Vegetarian diet excludes all animal products. No meat, fish, eggs, and dairy, relies solely on plant-based food for nutrition. And opposite to that, the carnivore diet has emerged on the market as a very interesting diet. Involves eating primarily animal products, meat, fish, and animal fats. It has a very restrictive nature as you only eat animal protein. It has a very high protein content, and there is a significant potential reduction in overall caloric intake and definitely reduction of carbs. The Atkins diet has been around for a very long time. It's a low-carb, high-protein diet developed by Dr. Robert Atkins in the 1960s. And let's not forget the autoimmune diet, which is essentially a modified and more restricted paleo diet because nuts and seeds are not allowed on this diet. And then the last but not least, the Whole30 diet, which is simply a 30-day diet, a 30-day elimination diet that cuts out sugar, alcohol, grains, legumes, dairy, and processed foods. So basically, it's a autoimmune diet for 30 days. So what I'd like to talk about in this episode, continuing the conversation about diets, is I'm going to move on to eating patterns, because taking its place alongside diets, there's the well-known intermittent fasting eating habit. This is not a diet per se. It's more of an eating pattern that cycles between periods of fasting and eating using either the 16-8, so 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating interval, or 18-6, 18 hours of fasting, 6 hours of eating. So it narrows your eating window to a 6 or 8 hours. There are some people who push it to 4 hours, and there are some people who eat once a day in a 24-hour window. Those are rare, and they're not very common. It's very hard to comply with this. So I'd like to talk about intermittent fasting because it's got significant value in our way of eating and it's got multiple benefits. And I'd like to discuss some things you might not know about how intermittent diet affects our bodies. So there are very significant advantages to this type of eating. Weight loss, specifically fat loss, it improves insulin sensitivity. Who doesn't need that? And who hasn't heard of insulin resistance? It improves our sugar control. It triggers and supports a very healthy cellular repair process and may support longevity due to its anti-inflammatory, very widely accepted and documented effects. So we know that it's anti-inflammatory to allow fasting for a long period of time. It helps your body. It does allow your liver extra time to process all the foods and the exposure from the previous day. And many people have significant improvement in their health if they respect this eating pattern and eat in moderation during the window and make sure that they have a variety of foods. Now, the problem with the intermittent fasting is got its own downsides. Because of limiting our eating window, we could easily restrict the variety of foods, increasing our risk of nutrient deficiency. And this type of eating can affect many hormones, our cortisol, our thyroid, our growth hormone. It can also trigger disorganized and erratic eating patterns in some people, which unfortunately predisposes to overeating risk. You get hungry, and then when you are ready to eat, oh my, do you eat in that 6-hour or 8-hour window? So again, extended fasting periods without adequate protein intake or resistant exercise to maintain muscle mass will also lead to muscle loss. So it's important to practice this diet in a meaningful, mindful way, maybe with the help of a provider that can guide you a little bit. So let me say a few words about how this type of eating affects our main hormones. Because this diet and intermittent fasting is not really a diet, but it's a way of eating, will influence our metabolism, will influence our appetite, our energy balance, and it definitely impacts our main hormones. So let me talk about how intermittent fasting can affect either favorably or unfavorably all our major hormones. So number one, insulin. Guess what? Intermittent fasting can reduce insulin levels. When we fast, we don't need insulin. Insulin is a growth factor that makes us kind of grow fat cells. We don't need that. So less insulin, it's actually better. Now, this decreased requirement to make insulin will actually improve insulin sensitivity, which means that the interaction of insulin with its receptors is much better. And insulin can actually do its job of allowing sugar inside the cells and promotes the utilization of stored glucose and fat to generate energy. And that is an excellent result. There's lots more to say about this, but let's keep it short and sweet and move on to number 2, glucagon. Glucagon, it's the opposite of insulin, so to speak. And unfortunately, intermittent fasting can increase our glucagon levels. This is the hormone that has the exact opposite action to insulin. Will stimulate the release of glucose or sugar from the cells into our bloodstream to maintain our blood sugar levels. Probably not a bad thing to happen if the insulin and the glucagon are in balance. Number 3, our cortisol. Now, this is our stress hormone. It plays an absolutely vital role to regulate our metabolism, our weight, our immune system, and our response to stress and inflammation. Cortisol normally is released as a surge or a peak in early morning, helping us wake up and tackle the day in force with good energy. And then our levels slowly decline gradually until at nighttime, they are very low, allowing our body to shut down and sleep. Cortisol can suffer some very significant fluctuations during intermittent fasting periods, and that's not so great as the body needs a stable, reliable cortisol diurnal pattern. Unfortunately, prolonged fasting patterns or very severe restricted caloric fasting patterns will induce a state of stress, which can and will elevate our stress hormone levels. So will raise our cortisol. And that can have negative consequences on our health. What is very important is that this type of response has a great individual variability. That means some people may experience a temporary rise in cortisol during fasting. And yes, this might be counterproductive, but others may completely adapt to the fasting pattern without any significant fluctuations during fasting of cortisol. So again, that's variable from individual to individual. So it's important to perhaps seek advice from someone if you feel that that's happening to you. Another issue with cortisol and intermittent fasting is the fact that disrupting the normal circadian rhythm of the cortisol release pattern caused by possibly erratic eating schedules with intermittent fasting can impact bottom line cortisol balance. So let me discuss some key things to consider during intermittent fasting in order to support a healthy cortisol balance. Number one, prioritize your sleep quantity and quality, as that impacts your adrenal function and cortisol release directly. You need to manage stress through relaxation techniques, meditation, or moderate exercise, and maintain a balanced diet rich in nutrients, which helps support a good hormonal balance overall. And again, last but not least, engage in moderate exercise, avoiding excessive strenuous exercise, which can impact and increase cortisol levels. So we talked about insulin and glucagon. We talked about cortisol. Let's talk about thyroid. Thyroid hormone levels can be impacted by prolonged fasting and severe caloric restriction, just as cortisol was. This prolonged fasting and severe caloric restriction can put the body in stress mode and slow down our metabolic rate by decreasing thyroid production. Unfortunately, this can be very counterproductive, have the opposite of the intended effect. So if you have an underlying thyroid condition, such as Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, you should consider intermittent fasting with caution and probably only under the guidance of a healthcare provider. If you don't know, T3 is our active form of thyroid hormone, and during fasting, the body may downregulate and decrease our T3 production to conserve our energy and adapt to the reduced caloric intake. Reverse T3, an inactive form of T3, may increase in response to fasting or caloric restriction, and this is a compensatory mechanism to conserve our energy. However, we know that elevated reverse T3 levels are higher in people with chronic inflammation. So the regular monitoring of thyroid hormone levels can help your doctor understand the impact of intermittent fasting on your thyroid function. And your thyroid protocol treatment or your fasting protocol might need to be adjusted based on your individual hormonal profile and metabolic response to fasting. Number 5 hormone, and very, very important hormone, is our growth hormone. Our growth hormone is being released through fasting and caloric restriction. This hormone is one of our anabolic hormones. It builds us up. It stimulates muscle growth and fat metabolism, stimulates bone density and cellular repair processes. Its metabolic effects are linked to anti-aging and longevity. This hormone is released typically with a pulsatile pattern, and its peak release spurts occur during specific times. For example, only during deep sleep and fasting. So, intermittent fasting may enhance the amplitude and duration of growth hormone pulses, which leads to naturally elevated levels. More growth hormone during fasting means improved insulin sensitivity, fat loss in the form of lipolysis. That is when the body breaks down our fat for energy, especially when our glucose or sugar levels are down, and that maintains our energy balance and muscle preservation because we use fat, not carbs. Growth hormone plays such a crucial role in muscle protein synthesis in collagen synthesis and tissue regeneration that elevated levels of growth hormone during fasting can enhance muscle growth, recovery, and adaptation to exercise, ultimately contributing to our overall fitness and physical performance. Remember, this is the hormone that keeps us lean and fit. Also, I discussed for each hormone, there are individual variability issues, as intermittent fasting response of the growth hormone can vary greatly among individuals based on age, gender, body composition, and overall metabolic health. Some people may experience a pronounced increase in growth hormone with fasting, while others may show only a moderate or very modest response. Number 6, leptin. This is a hormone you might have not heard of or know much about, but this is a hormone produced by our adipose tissue or our fat cells. It is our satiety hormone. It's regulating hunger and energy balance. It makes us feel full. It is a hunger suppressing hormone. It signals to our brain that we are full, reduces our appetite, and reduces our drive to eat more. The problem is the development of possible fasting-induced leptin changes or leptin resistance. And this is something you might have not heard about. And if you didn't, let me mention it here. Women and men that use prolonged and chronic fasting may develop leptin resistance, a condition where the body becomes less responsive to leptin signals, which clearly impacts our appetite control and metabolic functions. Unfortunately, leptin resistance is associated with obesity, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and ultimately diabetes. Short-term fasting may actually improve leptin sensitivity. Same thing here as with all the other hormones. Please consider individual variability. Remember, individuals with eating disorders, metabolic conditions should likely consult a healthcare provider before starting intermittent fasting. They might already be leptin resistant. Number 7, ghrelin is the hunger hormone. So leptin is the hormone that tells us we're full, stop eating. Ghrelin is the hormone that tells us to eat. It's produced primarily in the stomach. It stimulates our appetite and promotes food intake, makes us hungry. Now, what's interesting is that increased ghrelin levels stimulate growth hormone release. And that's the hormone that keeps us lean and fit. So being hungry and having a little extra ghrelin is not bad at all. During fasting, ghrelin levels tend to rise as a normal physiological response to energy deprivation because the body needs fuel. So it's going to tell your brain, hey, you got to eat something, get me some fuel. So ghrelin secretion and release is influenced by meal timing, meal nutrient composition, but also by our sleep patterns, stress levels, and other metabolic signals. Fluctuations in ghrelin levels with intermittent fasting will definitely influence our hunger perception, our meal anticipation, and food cravings. Repeated exposure to intermittent fasting protocols may cause the body to adapt its ghrelin response to accommodate the fasting periods and normalize our hunger signals, which in turn can enhance our metabolic flexibility and improve our nutrient intake utilization over time. So basically, the more you do it, the better your body will be at managing and handling intermittent fasting as long as you get a positive response to it. And more to come on that in a second. Number 8, adiponectin. This is a hormone also produced by our fat cells, just like leptin. It plays a key role in regulating various metabolic processes, and it's known for its anti-inflammatory, insulin sensitizing, and cardioprotective effects. We know that fasting can promote the release of adiponectin, which enhances its anti-inflammatory properties because it reduces the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, it actively suppresses inflammation in tissues, and prevents the development of chronic inflammatory conditions associated with obesity and metabolic syndrome. So, adiponectin is good. Number 9, norepinephrine. This is one of our stress response hormones. Its levels can increase due to fasting. which boosts our metabolic rate, and fat mobilization called lipolysis, which I mentioned earlier. The fasting periods stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, our stress response, which leads to increased catecholamine production. One of them is norepinephrine, in order to help sustain our energy and metabolic processes in the absence of food intake. Norepinephrine will activate the breaking down of our fat reserves to release energy during fasting. So it's a good hormone to have and release in abundance. Not too much though. This norepinephrine is also involved in alertness, focus, and cognition. How many times have you not eaten and then felt sluggish? It was hard to focus and you felt sleepy instead of alert after a meal. And how many times have you experienced an increase in alertness, focus, and energy because you fasted? Number 10 is melatonin. This is a hormone primarily produced by the pineal gland in response to darkness. It signals our body that it is time to sleep. Our melatonin levels rise in the evening and remain elevated during the night to promote sleep and help regulate the body's internal clock. Obviously, fasting and feeding cycles can influence the body's internal clock and melatonin balance. Eating close to bedtime or during periods when melatonin levels naturally would rise, like at nighttime, may disrupt the body's ability to transition into the sleep phase. So keep in mind that the duration and the timing of fasting periods can affect sleep quality and melatonin levels. Prolonged fasting or drastic changes in meal patterns may disrupt the normal circadian rhythm. Our normal hormone balance can be disrupted and our sleep architecture can be messed up, which creates sleep disturbances. So the idea is to establish consistent fasting routines, align meal timing with natural light to dark cycles, which can enhance a normal melatonin release cycle and support healthy sleep habits. And obviously, last but not least, number 11 on the list, sex hormones and fasting. Let's say a few words about that. Well, intermittent fasting can impact a woman's menstrual cycle and estrogen production. It is very likely that short-term intermittent fasting will not significantly disrupt estrogen levels in a woman because a woman's body is extremely able to adapt to moderate changes in eating patterns without messing up our estrogen production. However, we know for a fact that prolonged fasting may impact estrogen balance, can signal stress responses in the body, which raises our cortisol, and it's affecting estrogen levels detrimentally. Who doesn't know that women's menstrual cycles are sensitive to changes in energy availability and stress? You feel like crap, you're tired, it's going to mess up your cycle. You have a lot of stress, and suddenly, wow, I didn't get my period. What happened? Intermittent fasting practice can result in a significant energy deficit or create chronic stress if not done properly. That can disrupt ovulation and lead to irregular cycles. So if you are planning to become pregnant, you might think twice about intermittent fasting or specifically how you do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but consider seeing a doctor that could help guide you through this process. The same is also valid for testosterone in women. Short-term intermittent fasting may not significantly impact testosterone levels in women because, just like for estrogen, the body will adapt to moderate changes in eating patterns without drastically altering our testosterone production. However, extended periods of caloric restriction or chronic stress from prolonged fasting, or obviously other types of chronic stress, will potentially, and clearly, we know this, lower testosterone levels over time. It is well known that testosterone production in women is influenced by energy availability and nutrient intake. I have a whole podcast on how to boost your testosterone naturally. Please revisit that. It talks all about vitamins and minerals. So those are very important. If you do decide to do intermittent fasting, you want to make sure you meet your body's energetic needs, that you can have adequate amounts of protein. And specifically, you're going to combine intermittent fasting with exercise. because resistance training can support healthy testosterone production and maintenance of muscle mass. These two things can counteract the potential decrease in testosterone due to the fasting practice. Also, while you engage in intermittent fasting, it's important to manage stress through relaxation techniques, good sleep pattern, mindfulness, because all of these will ultimately help you support you and your overall sex hormone balance. Again, just to kind of close it up, it is really important to listen to your body and monitor how you feel while doing intermittent fasting. For example, if you experience persistent, overwhelming stress symptoms, if you feel fatigued, you have issues with sleep, then consider giving it up, modifying your fasting protocol, or seeking some guidance from a healthcare provider who can help you do some lab work, maybe figure out what type of imbalance you're dealing with. I will end here, and I'll come back next week to discuss the pros and cons of following a specific diet, and I'll revisit some of the diets that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. And then I will discuss what a perfect diet would look like and how realistic it is that we are going to eat a perfect diet. Again, thank you for listening, and I will meet you back here next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you are one of my faithful listeners and you are finding value and enjoying these episodes, please feel free to leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening to. Also, if you find the content in these topics useful, not just to you, but to someone else, a friend, a loved one, or simply an acquaintance that you know could benefit from the knowledge I share here, please feel free to forward my podcast to them. If you live in California and you'd like to work with our practice to help you achieve your wellness goals, please go to our website, www.herabeautyandwellness.com, and request an appointment. It will be our privilege to help you in any way, shape, and form we can. Any suggestions on a topic of beauty, wellness, or anti-aging are welcome. All you have to do is go to the website, leave a suggestion into the AI chat, and I promise you, if you ask, I will listen and add your suggestion to my list of topics that I want to get to as soon as possible. Please join our Facebook group, The Wellness Optimizing Warrior MD. It's a small growing community that focuses on wellness, on what's new, what's safe, and what works in beauty, wellness, and anti-aging.